3 sharp knocks hit my door like a verdict. "I need the money tomorrow," my father barked, shoving a thick folder against my chest, my sister's $800,000 debt. "And no delays," he added, like a man used to obedience. I just smiled, the kind that made him pause. "Okay," I said. He left, thinking I'd pay. 4 hours later, the airport lights flickered across my suitcase. When he returned to collect, all he found was a locked door and a box with his name on it. Inside that box was the moment his power finally ended. He just didn't know it yet. My name's Claire Lawson, and the man pounding on my door that night was my father, Edward Lawson. To most people, he's the kind of man who commands a room, polished suit voice, like a closing deal. To me, he's the man who taught me that love in our family always came with an invoice. And then there's Megan, my younger sister. She's the soft one, the fragile one Dad swore he had to protect. I was the strong one, which really meant I was the one expected to fix everything when things fell apart. When our mom passed away, the balance in our family shifted overnight. Dad poured all his attention into Megan like she was made of glass. Every mistake she made became someone else's problem, usually mine. I still remember being 22, working 2 jobs, and wiring her college tuition after she lost her scholarship. Dad called it helping family. I called it bailing out bad choices, but I did it anyway. When Megan got married, Dad asked if I could contribute to the wedding because Tyler, her husband, was still finding his footing. I covered the catering bill and smiled through the photos. A year later, their first home unexpectedly needed a larger down payment. Dad asked again. I sent the money pretending it didn't sting. It became a pattern. Megan would overspend, Tyler would gamble, Dad would guarantee something, and I'd clean it up. Every time I thought I'd finally paid enough to earn peace, another favor showed up with my name already written on it. I don't think my father ever saw me as a daughter, not in the way he saw Megan. I was more like a safety net he forgot had feelings. The responsible one. The one who didn't need thanks, just results. The night he handed me that folder, $800,000 in red ink, wasn't the first time he'd ordered me around. It was just the first time I realized I didn't have to obey. You see, I built my life from scratch. I run my own consulting firm in downtown Austin. Every late night, every contract, every client, I did that alone. But Dad never looked at me and saw independence. He saw resources. When he stood there barking orders, it wasn't just about money. It was about control. That's what people like him don't understand. Control feels like love when you grow up around it. You confuse fear with loyalty, obedience with care. For years, I thought staying quiet made me a good daughter. But that night, with his cologne still hanging in the air and his voice echoing down the hall, something inside me shifted. I finally saw it for what it was, not family, not duty, just a cycle built on guilt. And I knew exactly how to end it. After he left that night, the house felt different. Quieter, but not peaceful, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to fold the way I always did. The folder sat on my counter, heavy and ugly, still warm from his hands. $800,000. Megan's debt, my father's demand, my silence. I made tea just to have something to do, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The steam fogged the marble surface, and for a second, I saw my own reflection, tired, obedient, familiar. I almost laughed. How many times had I stood right there fixing the chaos they created, while pretending I wasn't drowning too? I opened the folder. The first page was Tyler's loan agreement signed by my father as a guarantor. The next few were receipts from Megan's shopping sprees, designer shoes, resort vacations, handbags that cost more than my rent when I was starting out. Near the bottom, Dad's signature appeared again, approving an extension. That was the part that hurt the most. He didn't even hesitate to attach his name to her disaster, and somehow, when it collapsed, I was the one who got the knock on the door. For a long time, I thought family meant sacrifice, but that night, looking at those numbers, I realized family in our house meant obedience, and I was done obeying. The clock on the oven blinked 11:47, less than 13 hours until noon, until Dad would show up expecting the transfer. I stared at that folder like it was a test, and for once, I decided to fail it on purpose. I called no one. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just started moving. I packed the essentials, passport, laptop, phone, a photo of Mom and me, by the lake. I put on jeans, tied my hair back, and looked around the apartment I'd built on my own. Everything in it represented years of effort, every piece of furniture a small rebellion against the kind of life he'd planned for me. I left the folder where it was and opened a blank one on my desk for something new, a plan. It came easier than I expected. Maybe because I'd been preparing for this without realizing it. I wrote down 3 words, take it back. At 12:32 a.m., I sent a message to Laura Bennett, my attorney, and the closest thing I have to a sister who never borrowed money. You awake, I typed. She replied a minute later. You finally doing it. Yes. She didn't ask what it meant. She already knew. By 2:00 a.m., I had booked a one-way flight to Maine, leaving at sunrise. I packed one suitcase, left my apartment keys on the table, and stared at the folder one last time. It wasn't just a document anymore. It was a mirror showing everything I refused to be again. The fixer, the rescuer, the good daughter who paid for everyone else's mistakes. When I closed the door behind me, the sound echoed through the hallway, clean final, like a verdict. The airport was still half asleep when I got there. It smelled like coffee and anticipation, the kind that hums in your chest before something irreversible. My suitcase felt lighter than it should have, not because I'd packed less, but because I'd finally stopped carrying them with me. While waiting at the gate, I opened my laptop. My fingers didn't hesitate. I'd spent years watching my father manipulate contracts, shift assets, twist rules. I learned enough to build my business, and now I'd use it to build my freedom. The first thing I did was freeze the Lawson family trust, the one my father had quietly linked to my name for tax efficiency. Efficiency, my favorite lie of his. With a few clicks, his shortcut turned into a wall. Then I moved my personal funds into a private account untied from every family business he'd touched. Next, I revoked the signatory rights he'd convinced me to grant him just in case. There would be no more just in case. By the time my plane started boarding, I'd undone a decade of his quiet control. But there was one thing left: the message. That night back at my apartment before leaving, I'd built it carefully, a cardboard box. Inside it, I placed copies of every wire transfer I'd ever made to cover Megan and Tyler's messes, printed emails where Dad thanked me in one sentence and ordered me in the next, the deed to the house Megan called theirs with my LLC printed clearly at the bottom, and on top of everything, a cashier's check for $10,000, the exact amount Dad once said was enough for loyalty. Then came the note. I wrote it by hand because I wanted him to see every letter. You always said family comes first, but you never asked who keeps paying for that family. What's inside this box isn't revenge. It's a receipt. I sealed it, left it on the porch, and set the doorbell camera to record. When the plane took off, I looked down at the city shrinking beneath me. Austin at dawn looks cleaner from the sky. All the noise and guilt blur into soft lines and light. I thought about Dad waking up in a few hours rehearsing his speech about duty and respect. About Megan probably crying already, certain I'd fix it. About myself finally too tired to. Somewhere over the clouds, my phone buzzed with a text from Laura, all documents secured. He won't be able to touch a cent. I stared at the message until my throat tightened. Relief, fear, freedom. It all mixed into something wordless. For the first time in years, no one expected anything from me. No one was calling, crying, demanding, or blaming. I took a slow breath and whispered to no one, "It's over." But it wasn't, not yet. The real ending would come when my father opened that box and realized the daughter he thought he owned had finally handed in her resignation. At exactly noon, my doorbell camera came alive. I wasn't there to hear it in person, but later, I watched every second. My father, Edward Lawson, stood on my porch in his usual navy suit, tie, straight jaw, tighter than ever. Behind him was Megan clutching her designer purse like a life vest. The camera caught her whispering, "Maybe she's not home." Dad ignored her. He knocked once, twice, then hard enough to rattle the frame. "Claire." His voice still carried that tone, the one that didn't ask, only commanded. "Open up. We had a deal." There was a pause. His eyes shifted, scanning the porch until they landed on the box, plain brown, sealed with clear tape. My handwriting on top, Edward Lawson. He frowned, bent down, and picked it up. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. Megan leaned closer. Maybe she left the check inside. He tore the tape open with the impatience of a man who's never been denied anything. Papers spilled out, wire receipts, contracts, copies of deeds, everything I'd ever given up under the banner of family. "What is this?" He barked again, flipping through page after page. His voice started to rise. "Mortgage transfer, Oakline Holdings." "That she put the house in her name." Megan froze. What does that mean? It means he snapped nothing she ever gave us was really a gift. Then he saw the USB drive. Confused, he slid it into the small Bluetooth speaker I'd left beside the box. My voice filled the porch. "Dad, you taught me family comes first, but you never taught me what to do when family uses that love like a contract. What's in this box isn't revenge, it's accountability. You said no delays. So here's your answer. I'm done paying for other people's debts." For a moment, there was silence. Then Megan whispered, "She recorded that Dad didn't answer." He stared at the photo I'd placed on top Mom and me at the lake when I was little, both of us laughing. His hand trembled just a flicker, but enough to show that maybe the invincible Edward Lawson was cracking. Then he shouted not words, just raw noise, the kind that comes when power finally meets its limit. Papers fluttered around him like broken promises. Megan started crying, asking what to do. He didn't answer. He just said, "We lost her," and turned away. That moment, captured on the doorbell camera, became the most peaceful thing I'd ever seen. Not because it was pretty, but because it was proof. Proof that walking away didn't make me cruel. It made me free. 1,400 miles away, sitting in a quiet cafe by the Maine coastline, I watched it all on my phone. When he screamed, I didn't flinch. I just whispered to myself, "No, Dad, you didn't lose me. You lost control." A week passed before my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something in me knew. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity or maybe closure won. "Claire," a voice said, soft, unsteady. "My father." Edward Lawson, the man who used to fill every silence with orders, now sounded like he was borrowing air. "I'm not calling for money," he added quickly, almost embarrassed by the need to clarify. "I just need to talk." For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear waves outside my window in Maine, gentle and rhythmic, the opposite of him. Finally, I said, "Go ahead." He took a breath that cracked halfway through. "You embarrassed me," he said first. Predictable, sharp. But then his voice dropped lower. "And you were right." I leaned back in my chair. "About what?" "Everything." His words came out heavy. "About how I used you. About how I turned love into leverage. I thought I was protecting this family, but really, I was just protecting control." It was strange hearing him speak that plainly. The same man who'd once said, "Never show weakness," now sounded human. "Megan's furious," he continued. "She says you betrayed us, but when I asked her who she expected to save her, now she didn't have an answer." I let the silence stretch. "And what did you tell her?" He gave a hollow laugh. "I told her she'd have to learn what saving herself feels like." For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt distance. Safe, necessary distance. "Dad," I said quietly, "I didn't want to destroy you. I just couldn't keep being the solution." He was quiet again, then said, "You remind me of your mother, the calm, the quiet strength. I used to hate it because it made me feel small." His voice cracked. "But now I think that's what I was supposed to learn." I closed my eyes. The version of him on the phone wasn't the man who barked orders. It was someone stripped of armor, realizing too late that control doesn't equal love. "I can't fix what I've done," he said, "but maybe I can start over, without pretending." "Maybe," I said softly, "if you start with honesty." He chuckled weakly. "No folders, no demands. Maybe next time I'll visit with coffee instead of contracts." "Deal," I said. When the call ended, I stared out at the gray ocean until it blurred. For years, I'd wanted him to apologize. I didn't realize what I really wanted was for him to understand. And for once, he finally did. That was the first real conversation we'd ever had, and it didn't cost a cent. 3 months later, Maine had begun to feel like mine. The air smelled different here, salt pine coffee and a kind of stillness I'd never known. My mornings no longer started with emails or crises, just the hiss of my kettle and the chatter of seagulls outside my window. I'd rented a small cottage near the harbor, nothing fancy, just quiet. From the porch, I could see the docks and the local market where everyone seemed to know each other's names. For the first few weeks, I kept my distance. I wasn't ready to explain who I was or why I'd come. But eventually, I stopped hiding. I started volunteering at the community center, teaching basic financial literacy workshops for women. The first class had 10 women. One of them, a grandmother named Ruth, said she'd co-signed a car loan for her son and was now paying it alone. Another whispered that her husband handled everything until he didn't. Their stories sounded too familiar, and when I told mine, I didn't glamorize it. I said I spent half my life rescuing people who never learned how to swim. I stopped when I realized I was the one drowning. They nodded, some cried, and for the first time, my pain had purpose. One evening, my phone rang again. Megan. I hesitated, half expecting tears or blame, but her voice surprised me. It was calm, almost small. "Dad's doing better," she said. "He joined some accountability group for business leaders. Says it helps." I smiled faintly. "That's good." She went quiet for a moment, then said I got a job, real one, at a furniture store downtown. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I leaned back against the wall. "Are you proud of yourself? I'm trying to be," she whispered. "It's quiet, without you fixing everything." "It's supposed to be," I said softly. "Quiet means you stopped running." Then she said something I hadn't heard in years. "Thank you, Claire, for not rescuing me." When the call ended, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad, just grateful that the story had finally started to change. A few days later, I received a postcard in the mail. It was from Dad, a photo of a fishing dock, blue sky, messy, handwriting on the back. "You were right. I taught you everything about business and nothing about love. Learning now. Proud of you. Dad." I pinned it above my desk. That night, I walked down to the shoreline. The wind was cold, the waves steady like they'd been waiting all along. I thought about the box, the door, the screams, and how it all led here. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to knock. The only sound on my porch was the sea and the freedom that didn't need forgiveness to exist. Have you ever been the one holding your family together until you couldn't anymore? Tell me in the comments how you learned to let go. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this one.